A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you to the 171st BASL webinar and the 28th webinar of the fourth series, which is a series of professional, personal, and career development webinars organized by the Seminars Committee of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka for the year 2021-2022. Today's topic is drafting your CV, facing interviews, and negotiating employment terms. These webinar series are conducted on Zoom platform, and for those of you who are unable to join us through Zoom, could join us by watching the live stream on the BASL YouTube channel. The 170 webinars conducted by the Seminars Committee up to date are available for you on this YouTube channel anytime for your convenience. The Seminars Committee of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka is led by Chairman of the Seminars Committee, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, whose brainchild these webinar series are. Together with convener of the Seminars Committee, Assistant Secretary, Bar Association, Mr. Pasinda Silva, and co-conveners, Mr. Pandula Vanyarachi, Mr. Oshan Uberatna, Ms. Anne Devananda, and Ms. Nikini Mapitikama. I further take this opportunity to thank the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mrs. Alia Pires, President's Council, and the other members of the Bar's Management Committee of the Bar Association for their support and guidance. Today, we have a practical and useful webinar for those of you who would like to explore your options as in-house counsel or go into other employment sectors. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome Ms. Rosita Fernando, attorney at law, who will be conducting this session. Rosita Fernando is a dual qualified lawyer. She is a solicitor of England and Wales and an attorney at law in Sri Lanka. She has demonstrated experience in commercial contracts, privacy laws, open source software licensing, and IP. Rosita is currently working at a leading tech company in Sri Lanka. Welcome, Rosita. Thank you for coming on board. Members joining the session by Zoom may send in their questions through a Q&A chat box to reach Ms. Rosita. Without any further ado, I would now hand over the session to her. Rosita, over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Yes, I hope everyone can see this. And you can see this, right?
Yes, yes.
And you can see this, right? Sorry, are you on mute?
No. Yes, we can see it. We can see the presentation only.
Okay, super. So today's agenda is, I'll start off by kind of giving you all some tips on kind of editing and drafting your CV so it kind of stands out. Then I'll go into a bit about getting the right professional qualifications because I've done the whole MBA, LLM, professional qualifications, solicitors, all that. So I'll just give you all my experience on how I kind of went along and got them and how useful those are. Then go into about networking, the importance of networking. And then finally, negotiating key employment terms like salaries, whether fixed term or permanent. And basically a few tips on facing the interviewer and what kind of questions they might ask you. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And as Anne said, you can type any questions you have in the Q&A box. And okay, so let me just go on to the first one. So this is actually very important, right? Because when recruiters see your CV, it's like a whole bunch of information, right? So what I do just to make their life a bit easier is to have a very brief introduction at the top, like nothing more than 4 or 5 lines. And I'll show you my CV in the next slide. But I would say you should always include a very brief introduction at the very top, because when someone looks at your CV, their eye goes to the top of the CV. And, you know, an average person only has like 7 seconds attention span. Like when you're glancing at something, they'll only look at the first few paras of your CV. And if it's interesting only, they will go further down. So you have to catch any recruiter's eye by having like just very to the brief, very concise statement about you and your experience. So in my case, I've just said I'm a dual qualified lawyer with over 5 years experience in commercial contracts, privacy, IP, and open source software. And I'm currently employed as a manager at ABC company. So that is very, very, very concise, and it gives the recruiter a very good introduction and very concise, very summarized form. And then if he or she is interested in learning more, they can scroll down to my CV. So then I would also say, don't include these generic skills like good communication skills, good interpersonal skills, because those kind of things can't be measured. Now I see a lot of CVs where they put like, whole bunch of skills, like, but how do you prove that? How can it be measured? They're very subjective, so I would basically put something that is very objective. Now, if you have good language skills, you can say English is excellent, because those you can measure, right, during the interview. They will ask you, they'll speak to you in English or Sinhala or Tamil, but put measurable criteria. So that's why I have like said, I have experience in these areas, this number of experience, and I'm currently working here. I don't have any like very vague or subjective wording on my CV. The next point I would tell you is also for you to customize your CV for each job role. So what happens is, especially now in my field, if it's an in-house lawyer, you might have the vacancy might be commercial tech contracts, a tech lawyer who has to review contracts and negotiate and review and draft them, right? So for that kind of a role, you don't need, work that you've done for the BOI or, land registry searches. So you just have a like kind of a master CV, but customize that to suit the particular role. So if, for example, the vacancy is regulatory affairs, then they are not going to be so interested about your tech contract experience. They'll be like, okay, have you worked with the BOI? Have you worked with the company, register of companies, so on, UDA, though that kind of experience would be relevant. Maybe you don't have the exact experience that the role is asking for, right? But you can still put anything that's near to that, just not something out of this world, like, privacy related experience. Oh, actually, privacy is relevant for regulatory affairs. Sorry about that. But like, don't put like, okay, in my case, you don't need to put something like open source software licensing review, because that's not relevant for regulatory affairs. Then also, I would strongly advise you all to read very carefully the responsibilities, job responsibilities that have been advertising with the vacancy. So then you just match your experience to the role requirements. And it's very easy even for the recruiter to read it. Remember, whoever is reading your CV is not necessarily going to be a lawyer. It'll be a HR recruiter. So for them, it should be easy for them to read, like without any like long-winded terms or anything like that. Just pick the keywords up from the vacancy announcement and use that on your CV. And another tip from recruiters that I've heard is that they no longer look at cover letters. Cover letters are a bit more kind of fallen into obeisance. So what you could do is just have that brief introduction on your CV. So then that's basically gives like a intro about you and has all the important points in like a few paragraphs. Also, again, use bullets. So you see plenty of CVs that go on and on, paragraphs, essays of your experience. And yes, you may think that is important, and you might want to give context and all that. You can do that at the interview. Here, you just need to put everything very briefly, very concisely, and try to avoid using a lot of legalese. Just say, you negotiated and drafted a contract, this type of contract, and like outsourcing contracts, software maintenance contracts. and then you advise management on these things. So you can say very briefly. You don't need to go into a whole essay, because remember, you have to limit your CV to about 2 pages. 1 page is optimum, but if you have the relevant experience, 2 pages maximum. You should never go above 2 pages. And then if there are any gaps in your CV, so for example, you've taken some time off for personal reasons, or sickness or anything like that, what I do is, if it's only a few months of a gap, instead of mentioning the month and year in my CVs and all that, job experience and all that, what I do is I put the year. So for example, if from April to July I took a break, I would just put 2022. That's it. I won't mention April. So it's not very obvious that there is a 3-month break or a 4-month break. If the break is longer, let's say it's like more than 1 year, and you can't really avoid showing that, what I would suggest is, you don't need to explain that on the CV or on the cover letter or anything like that. At the interview, if they ask, you can explain like, yeah, I took a break. You don't need to go into details, but you can explain it like that. Now, I've also seen people mentioning their O-level results, their school, their age. I mean, as we go forward, especially in the company that I work, age is no longer mentioned. You don't put your date of birth, and I mean, you don't really put your school or your like what you won in school or debating competitions or anything like that. I mean, extracurricular activities are good and all, but like put more relevant experience and like more newer information instead of something that happened about 10, 15 years ago. And with regard to referees, now that is very important, and I would strongly advise you all to be very careful who you put down as a referee. Because I know somebody who put down like a co-worker or a line manager as a referee, and when the recruiter called them later on, they're given a bad reference. So then you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. And I mean, the recruiter might not bother with any other referee, that you're supposed to list 2 referees. They might just drop your CV from that. So just be very careful who you put down as a referee, and if possible, call the referee beforehand and say, I'm going to apply for these jobs. You might get a call. Please, respond, like let them know the kind of work that I've been doing with you. And another recruiter told me that not to put referees who are like your university lecturers. So if you're a new joiner, like you're just starting off, then it's fine to have a university lecturer. But mostly recruiters and companies want to see people like get a reference from people who have worked with you or for whom you have reported to. So that, just keep that in mind when you're including referees. So this is an example of my CV. I have blacked out important personal data related information. But you can see at the top, it's like just 3 lines. Do a qualified lawyer. Now that is important. Being a solicitor of England and Wales is a important professional qualification. And I'll get into that in a bit. But then I've said I've demonstrated experience in commercial contracts, data protection, open source software, licensing and IP, currently employed as black. I put my educational professional qualifications first because I mean, it's easy, it's not a lot. Whereas like my work experience is quite lengthy. So since it's only like 3 qualifications, but I have more qualifications than this. I'm a company secretary and commissioner for votes and those kind of things. But I haven't put those in here because they're not relevant for the particular job I would be applying. If it was relevant, you can include it, but just keep it brief, concise, easy to read. I mean, you can see even spacing here is, I think, 1.5. Font is easy to read, no fancy fonts. And here I've also highlighted the fact that I was awarded a gold medal in tax law, because recruiters want to see people who are like, who have gone the extra mile, who have done something important. Any time that you get like a, let's say, a very good like merit pass, honors pass, put those wherever possible, because it might show you, give you the edge over other CVs. If you go down to work experience, again, like okay, it's a bit wordy. I can't help it. I draft contracts for a living, but you can see I'm trying to keep even the bullets to like 2 lines wherever possible. So I've said negotiate and drafting software license and maintenance contracts, blah blah blah, procurement contracts, research collaboration agreements, reviewing open source software, advising senior managers or management on data protection, IP ownership, liability limitation. So you all can write something. It doesn't have to be exactly this, but put like a very easy to read, like kind of language. Use that kind of language. Bullets are your friend. Please use bullets. Avoid long paras wherever possible. And further down, I have also listed relevant transactional experience. So, for example, if you're applying for a tech contract vacancy, technology related vacancy, what you could do is you could just highlight all the other tech contracts that you had worked on. I mean, just be very careful when you like use client names because there's confidentiality and those kind of concerns. But you can say like, I negotiated and drafted a procurement contract involving IT infrastructure, or I negotiated and drafted a capital markets contract for a client in Italy, and like that. Again, very briefly, you don't have to go into detail, but you are showing that you do have relevant experience for the job role. Next, when you're thinking of getting like further qualifications. Now, I went through this whole uh, set of qualifications, and at when I chose to do the MBA was a very shiny new qualification that everybody seemed to be good doing. But I mean, as like time went by, and with my current work, my job role, MBA, what I learned in the MBA was not terribly relevant. I mean, what I learned from my LLM, I did a LLM on international trade law, was far more relevant. So you have to be very careful about the kind of qualification, the academic qualification you want to pursue. Like, so for example, if you're going more towards IP, there are LLMs in intellectual property. I think the Bar Association does all these certificate courses as well. Those are pretty good. And as well as like for in my case, what happened was I did a LLM in international trade law that was organized by the Bar Association. And what happened, law college, and what I learned there was very, very important, and I think it gives me an edge over other lawyers in my field, because my LLM taught us about things like English and French laws of contract, and also EU treaties, because we get a lot of EU related queries in my role. And also, this is very important, enforcement of foreign judgments. See, when you do an NDA with a counterparty that's in another country, you can insist that, okay, the governing law has to be Sri Lankan law, or the governing law has to be English law. But if that counterparty is in Qatar, and you can't, let's say you get a judgment in your favor, but when you go to Qatar, are you able to actually enforce that? Does Qatar recognize Sri Lankan court judgments or English court judgments? And actually, it doesn't. It doesn't have a reciprocal arrangement with England, so it hasn't signed up to the foreign enforcement of foreign judgments law. It hasn't signed up for that. So you'll be very careful. It's very easy for you to insist on English law or Sri Lankan law, whatever. But when you do that, just be very careful, mindful of the fact that negotiating, putting those nice clauses in are of no use if you can't enforce it. You have to think about enforcement as well. And I've met plenty of lawyers who aren't very aware of this fact. And that's a bit, I mean, if it does go into court and there is a judgment, then it's basically useless. You go into that amount of expenditure and there's nothing you can do in the end. And my LLM also taught about, performance bonds, arbitration, and also like ICC rules. We went into depth about that. So whenever the counterparty's lawyer would negotiate or respond back on things, it was very easy for me to respond to them or review whatever their suggestions are, because I have this background in arbitration and ICC rules. With regard to my MBA, I mean, I don't want to put down MBAs in general, but it has come uh, in handy occasionally, like when you're trying to decrypt what finance professionals are saying, especially if you're not from a finance background. So that, because you do subjects on financial accounting, management accounting, and corporate finance, so you're a bit more familiar with the terms, and that's because like it looks like the trick is, even if you don't know what they're talking about, the trick is to look like you understand, because you can always read it up later. You should never look clueless, because it's the worst thing you can do. They'll just use even more tedious language thereafter. But when it comes to qualifications, professional qualifications, so what I found most useful for me was my solicitor qualification, because I work for a company whose parent company is in UK. So the solicitor qualification came in very, very handy, and it also helped me negotiate a salary that is above the average salary for my level of experience. So you all should seriously think about getting a solicitor or an additional examination. You don't have to do all the subjects, right? So in the UK, it used to be something called QLTS. They have recently changed it into SQE, Solicitors Qualifying Examination. So you don't have to do all the subjects. You just have to do a bit of a conversion course, which involves some of the subjects and a bit of practicals where you have to write attendance notes and do research and those kind of things. And another kind of a very good qualification to have is the New York bar exam, because that is also available for foreign qualified lawyers. So your attorneys at law helps you to do these two examinations. There are conversion courses to these, and I think the perks. I mean, it's a bit costly, but the perks, I think, outweigh the costs of doing these kind of exams. And I would recommend a professional qualification over something like an MBA. But if you do decide to go for an MBA or an LLM, just make sure you choose a very good university. Now, I see a lot of universities that are advertised on Facebook and on the papers and all that. Like when you see some university, like something you're not familiar with, like these UK universities, just go on the university rankings table and just see which ranking they are. So I did my MBA in Aston University. So that is ranked within the top 100 for MBAs worldwide at that time. My LLM is from the University of Wales, because I did that through law college. And I mean, it was very, very good as well. But like, you still need to make sure that whatever university you choose has a good brand recognition. People know about it. People know that it's a good university. And also, as I said earlier, just make sure that the specialization is relevant for your industry. So if you're going more into intellectual property, that field, right? If you're working for a company that has a huge trademarks and patents portfolio, then yes, go for a LLM in intellectual property, or even one of those certificate courses or diplomas, because that will be greatly helpful for you. If you're going into like commercial contracts and stuff like that, then my LLM, that international trade law, that's also very good, because it teaches you about contract law, what do you call it, English and French laws of contract, EU treaties, enforcement of judgments of foreign jurisdictions, and so on. So those kind of things are the things that you need to look out for, because when I was doing my MBA and LLM, nobody was there to advise me, and I just thought, okay, MBA sounds nice to have on your CV. And even the LLM, that was the only LLM that was available in Sri Lanka at the time. But now there's a lot more different types of LLMs. So choose wisely. Don't be hasty. Choose wisely. Take your time. Consider relevance, and pick a good qualification to pursue. because you're spending money and your time on this particular qualification. So make sure it counts. So networking is another thing that I learned after I joined my present company. I've been there for 6 years. The thing with networking is like lawyers, I mean, the career advice that we generally get is lawyers need to be within the legal team. We shouldn't be hobnobbing with other divisions, and like, because we are supposed to maintain confidentiality, we should be a bit aloof, and I was like that, right? But I found out that networking opens a lot of doors, and creates opportunities to you. So for example, in the company that I work, we have job opportunities that are internally advertised from time to time. Now, I don't go and check our job board all the time, but because I network with people, like someone from HR or someone from finance would be like, oh, did you see this vacancy? This looks good. Why don't you apply? So you get those kind of opportunities if you network, if you're nice to people, and you're not too aloof and too just, and then you converse them nicely, and you help them out, and that's the other thing. Like legal kind of tends to be like work in a silo, but you can't work like that when you're working in a big organization. You don't want to be known as the lawyer to whom, when you go, they give you a long legalese response that they can't understand, or the lawyer that's not helpful, or the lawyer who says no to everything. So my boss used to say there are two types of lawyers. There's one type of lawyer who only sees risks and who will always be very risk averse. And then there's the other type of lawyers who will see opportunities. Even in a very challenging law, they will read it in such a way that if there is, they will find a way a legitimate way, that would work in the company's favor, instead of just saying a blanket no. Just be more proactive instead of just saying no, that can't be done, this can't be done. Because employers, especially you're dealing with business people, they don't like naysayers. They want someone who is proactive, will help. If it's no, yes, you can clearly say that, but at the same time, don't be known as the lawyer who only says no, and only says this can't be done and that can't be done. So this is actually something useful that I learned during my MBA. They have done some research, and they have found something like, I think 70% of promotions are due to who you know rather than what you know. So for example, that's why I was saying, network. The importance of network is networking. Because when, say, someone in your organization, let's say head of legal or CEO, when they know who you are, and then they know how good your work is, then it's easy. It's just that little bit easy for you to move up in your organization. You may be actually the most technically brilliant lawyer there is, might be, well known to, would have been first in your batch and all that. But if you don't have the right attitude, and if you just work in a silo, and you don't mingle with people, you don't network with people, and nobody knows who you are, then when an opportunity comes, they won't recommend you. So you just have to make sure that you're seen, and make sure that you network with people. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to always network like with higher management, senior management, just within anyone. I mean, we shouldn't be very title conscious, because anybody could tell you, look, there is an opportunity there, why don't you apply? Nobody's too small to help. And also part of being seen is to kind of engage, volunteer at work events. If there is a cocktail where there's a meet and greet, go for those things. Don't be like, we are lawyers and we are not supposed to mingle with business people. Don't be like that. Those kind of attitudes have changed now. It's only earlier it was like that. Now you have to be a bit more proactive and volunteer. Like even within your own company, you could have a workshop, right? You could have a workshop on contract negotiations. So for example, people in procurement or people in sales, you could have a workshop for them on how to negotiate business terms, how to enter into an NDA, what are the important clauses in an NDA. So volunteer for those things. Work with HR, because HR is usually the ones who organize workshops. Tell them, I can help with this. I can do a seminar on this. I can do a workshop on this. And then even outside your organization. So I'm part of an organization called the Diversity Collective, and I get invitations all the time, like even for Women's Days, Women's Day seminars, and those again go a long way in your actual company, because you become more visible now. People realize that, oh, you have been invited as a panelist for this particular event, and you're just building up some brand awareness about yourself, instead of nobody knowing who you are. Now people know who you are, so that it makes it just a bit more easier for you to navigate around your own company. And another one is like, you have to update, you have to create and update a profile on LinkedIn, because I get headhunting opportunities from time to time from LinkedIn, and that is because I keep it updated, and I put all relevant experience. And I also, there's a particular button that you can toggle on and off, where recruiters can see that you're open to new opportunities. Now, mind you, no one else can see this, only recruiters. So you can, if you toggle that, then they know, okay, she's in the market for a new job, and that makes it easy for them to approach you. So think about ways to network. So LinkedIn is great. I would highly recommend LinkedIn, and any other opportunities as well, whether it's BASL events, anything, diversity related events, Women's Day events. Volunteer and engage and participate. I was just also going to say that, like, I do kayaking during my spare time, and I actually met a recruitment manager at another tech company, and she updates me on any relevant job roles. But that's also good to know. Always build a good relationship, especially with HR professionals, HR personals, because they will reach out to you if there is a suitable opportunity. Our final topic is about negotiating employment terms. So this is actually a issue in any division, whether it's finance, HR, or legal, or business, marketing, and all that. Is people don't have an idea about the prevailing salary scales. So you might think, okay, for a starter, maybe 100,000 is good enough. And yes, 100,000 salary is a good salary for a starter. But if you have 5 years experience and you're still earning 100,000, that is not good. I think you have to kind of talk with people and kind of figure out. Don't be shy. You don't have to be shy to ask people, okay, what do you think is the salary for this particular role, this amount of experience? Don't be shy. Don't be scared. But it's important. This is very important, because there is, I think, a lot of instances where people either underquote or overquote the actual salary scale that is applicable to that role. So, and let's say you do get an idea, you say, okay, I'll ask for 250,000. 200,000, okay, 200,000 is the average scale for that role. But don't be, if you have the right qualifications, don't be scared to ask for more. You can go up to 250, right? It's the company, they will push back and they might say, no, 250 is too much. Why don't we settle for 200? You can say, no, 200 is not enough. Why don't we settle to 225? It's negotiating, just like you're negotiating a contract. You start here, they start there, and you basically meet at the midpoint. So don't be shy to do all that, but at the same time, don't be seen as very aggressive or pushy. And you only discuss like at the interview level. They might ask you what your salary expectations are, and then you can say, this is my expectation. But like, don't I suppose, be careful how you bring it out, because you don't want to be seen as purely money minded as well. And the other thing is, when you're going for an interview, please do your homework, read up about the company. Make sure it's not a startup, because most of the companies that fail are startups. So just be very, very careful in working at a startup. I worked at a startup, and yeah, it was, it folded pretty quickly, not because of me, But startups are generally very risky endeavors, and also they can't probably afford to pay you a huge salary either. So I would say kind of stay away from startups unless you're very very sure that it's going to work. Another question is like I see a lot of kind of vacancies that are fixed term contracts. Now, fixed term, I'm sure anybody who knows labor law, the difference between permanent contracts and fixed term contracts. Are fixed term contracts you can basically terminate by giving 3 months notice. Permanent employees, on the other hand, you can't terminate so easily. I mean, yes, your contract might say you can terminate with giving 3 months notice, but the actual labor law is when you're a permanent employee, you can only be terminated for disciplinary reasons. If there are no disciplinary reasons, let's say the company wants to lay off a few lawyers, then the only way you can terminate them is to either get their consent or get the consent of the Commissioner for Labor. So it's very, very difficult for people to basically fire or lay off permanent employees. So I would strongly advise when you're looking at a role, just make sure it's a permanent role. Don't go for consultancy contracts. Don't go for fixed term contracts. You know, go for the permanent role, and where they pay you your proper social security, EPF, ETF, gratuity, all those things apply to you. So make sure, when you choose a role, because you're going to spend a few years of your life in that role, make sure it's a permanent role. Even if the salary is higher in the fixed term contract, I would strongly advise you to stick to a permanent role. Finally, just wanted to take you through some of the questions that recruiters ask. They will ask a very general, broad question like, "Tell us about yourself." And you don't have to necessarily always talk about your work experience, but just be different. I was speaking to a recruiter the other day, and she said she hates it when people start with rehearsed answers where they like, "I am Rosita Fernando, I did this, I did that, I'm a solicitor." They don't like those kind of answers because everybody gives those kind of answers. Just be very relaxed and talk slowly and just make it look like it's not rehearsed. They'll also ask you like things like, "Why do you think you're suitable for this job?" So you can say, if it's a tech vacancy, you can say, "I actually have worked in technology roles, contracts. I have negotiated and drafted software licensing and maintenance contracts. I have reviewed open source software. I have that kind of background, and that's why I think I'm suitable for this job." They might also ask like, "What are the biggest challenges you have faced in your career?" And again, like, be very careful when you're mentioning a previous employee's name or previous clients, because those could be confidential information. But you can say something very general like how you had to deal with some maybe a difficult stakeholder, and how you came it. Maybe instead of writing emails, you pick up the phone and spoke with that person directly, because emails, it's so easy for things to get mistranslated and misinterpreted via emails. You may think you're writing the nicest possible email, but the person at the other end will be like, "What a rude email." And I have got emails like that, and I have sent emails like that. And from the reaction, I can tell, okay, maybe there was something maybe I was rude. I didn't mean to be rude, but that's how it comes across when you write emails. So it's always better sometimes, if you're having a problem with somebody, schedule a call, schedule a meeting, talk to them face to face, and try to kind of resolve it in that way. And also, another final point about emails: remember, emails can easily get forwarded. So be very, very careful what you put in an email. That's it. Are there any questions?
I think there are two questions, Rosita. First one is asking you which best site they can look at, but I think I would expand on that question and ask, what do you think is a better way to look for job opportunities? A website, or looking at it online, or whether we need to go out, like you said, networking?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think LinkedIn is pretty good. LinkedIn has a job section where you can just search for legal jobs in Sri Lanka. Use a wide term like that. You can keep an eye out on sites like Top Jobs and Express Jobs. but networking is also very good. But then again, people don't necessarily know you're looking for a job. So let's say while you're just randomly looking at job vacancies, you find a role in a company where you know the recruitment manager. You reach out to them directly because they might not always know that you're in the market for a job. And you could just keep people, especially if someone is working in a multinational where there's bound to be vacancies from time to time, you could just let them know unofficially that you're in the market and you're looking.
So you basically have to get the information across that you're looking for a job. And
Yeah, so just go ahead.
so would you recommend one particular site? I think that is the question that person has requested, is like, do you know what is a good site for you to look for work?
Um, hmm. Well, if it's in Sri Lanka, I've seen definitely LinkedIn. And LinkedIn also has that button where you can toggle it, and the recruiters would see that you're in the market.
Yes.
And even if that doesn't work out, that particular role doesn't work out, then they can reach out to you directly for other roles as well. I found top jobs also very helpful, but then that was a few years ago when I was looking for a new job. But internally, some companies have an internal job site as well. So keep an eye out on those and create job alerts whenever possible.
The other question is asking you, when the interviewer asks you, tell me about yourself. What does that exactly mean? Like, I think they're asking for what scope they need to answer. I can understand that sometimes you don't know. They say, tell me about yourself. It's just a very wide this thing. So where do you suggest one should start?
Okay, so it's a very open-ended question that they're asking there, and I think they are just trying to kind of gauge what kind of a person you are, and you kind of fit there because these companies have a particular behaviors that they look at, whether you're proactive, whether you come across as uh, straight talking, direct, and not going to shuffle around and not look in a certain way. What I mean there is like where you don't look dodgy as such. Where you're looking like looking like you'll be a good fit for the organization. So they are not exactly asking your work experience there. They might ask, okay, so if it's me, I would be like, that's difficult for me to answer now. It's a difficult
Fine.
question to answer.
Yeah.
Um, but I would start off very slowly and I would say some general things like, yeah, okay, so I studied here. I got my solicitor's qualification because that is important to me, but for everyone else, it's my different qualification. Um, so I would go on to that and probably stop and ask, like, do they want any other information? Like, you want me to talk about my work experience? You could ask, finish it like that.
Okay, so I think there is a follow-up. If anyone has any other additional questions, please put it on the Q&A box. There is a follow-up, I think, asking, are they asking for your qualifications? Like when they mean, like, tell me about yourself, are they asking you to exactly start with what you have studied?
Well, yes and no. If it's a HR person in the interviewer, now if it depends on who's interviewing you as well. If it's a legal person, then yeah, I guess you can say you got these qualifications. You went to law college, you did your LLM, or that. If it's a HR person, I would still say, uh, I'm so and so. I work in this company at the moment. I have. Obtained, like, don't go too much into like legal qualifications as such, but you can talk about your work experience, and again you can use those key terms that were in the job role. So for example, if the job role asked for experience in negotiating and drafting contracts, you can say I've negotiated and drafted contracts in my previous employment, and some of these contracts were technology related contracts. You can just go a bit explain. I think they are also checking how good your English is, can you respond to direct questions? Because you will be asked direct questions, right? In your job role, they'll ask, okay, can we do this or not? And that's about it. Just
Oh,
like don't
and
go.
yeah, I
Yeah, go
think
ahead.
the question, there is another one asking when they've asked a personal experience question asking when an interviewer asks you to sell yourself, like basically, I suppose maybe market yourself, whether they are talking about your qualification.
Well, yeah, I guess in that particular sense, they are talking about your qualifications and your work experience. Both go together. And I know, like in one interview, the interviewer was a lawyer. He actually asked me to review a contract then and there. That I thought was actually a good way to, I mean, because you are reviewing contracts, that's going to be the role. That was a very good way to kind of judge how competent you would be. Uh, yeah, so I hope you don't get a question saying sell yourself, because that's rather demeaning. That sounds quite demeaning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a specific question they were, I think, getting at. And then I don't think we have any more questions. Just one final thing from like now some of the CVs you have, they ask you to attach a photograph, or now the trend is to put your photograph in. Do you have any advice on that?
That's a tough question, because for lawyers, I don't think it's strictly necessary to put your photo in. But if you want to, there is no harm, and it makes that CV a bit more attractive. Now, if you look at my CV, that's just words only. I mean, you can do some formatting, you can add a photo, and yeah, as long as it's a nicely taken photo and you don't look like a weirdo, it should be fine, I think. But I don't think it's mandatory. I don't think people look at that photo and then decide to shortlist you. And if they do that, then that's cause for concern.
So, do you have any final thoughts for members joining us on YouTube and Zoom today?
Yeah, just I want to touch upon this. So I was working at a law firm, and then I went and joined a company. So the culture is very, very different in the two. And it takes you some time to kind of fully realize the differences. But when you're working in a company, like, it's very important not to kind of use legalese all the time, like legal jargon, because you just lose them. You lose your audience when you start using legal terms, technical terms. And also, I mean, networking, you're dealing with so many different divisions, right? And it's important now in this day and age, especially in my company, you can get peer reviewed. So let's say someone in a different division doesn't has not got doesn't find you very proactive, they can easily basically give you a bad peer review, and that would affect your ratings, your bonuses, reviews. So we are now like, if you are in a law firm, your attitude is always like, this is what I'm saying, do this, right? It should not be like that when you're in a company. It's like, okay, we would recommend this, but if they ask questions, we're like, okay, this is not possible, I'm sorry, but there are these kind of avenues. Just they come to you with their problems, right? And you might not be always be able to give them the exact answer that they're looking for, but you should be proactive in it. And if it's no, I'm sorry, it's no, there is no other way. Maybe you could also give an option, why don't you do it this way? Like, be like that. Don't be just no. This can't be done. Never, till hell freezes over. Don't say things like that.
I think we can take one more question, and they're asking you that that the particular person has done his LLB and MBA and all of that, but he or she struggles when the employer asks about salary expectation. I think that's a common problem a lot of people have when you go for this thing and they put the question to you, how much do you expect? How do you suggest people tackle the emotional constraint we have on that?
Yeah, that's true. And we are naturally inclined to quote a lower figure, because you would rather have the lower salary than not have that job, because you think you might be able to go ahead and get increments later on. So natural tendency is that. But if you're confident enough, and in your case you have a LLB and MBA from a state university, that counts a lot. And don't bring your standards down. Like, if the company is thinks that you're good, you're going to be a competent lawyer, and you're going to be an asset to the company, salary, I mean, unless you quote some million rupee salary, they can always adjust that each company has a band, from what I understand. So, for example, if the role is senior associate legal, the band might be like 150,000 to 200,000. Just hypothetically. So in that case, if you quote 200, 225 or 250, they will come back to you and they say, no, sorry, that is not going to happen. And then you try to negotiate. Usually HR and even the legal lawyer in that company can always adjust it. These are not hard and fast rules. And if they think you're a good fit, they might just offer you that higher salary. But don't measure yourself down. Don't put yourself down. Always ask for a good salary, because lawyers in in-house roles do get paid well. It's a well-paid area to be in, and you should not shy away from asking a reasonable salary.
I think that's all the questions we have for now. Uh, you have already given your final thoughts to us as well. So
Yeah.
let's conclude the session then. Thank you, Rosita, for coming on board today and giving us a lot of great tips and innovative tips, I must say, and information. And I think it would have been very useful to all of the people who have joined us on Zoom today and on YouTube. And I would like to thank you on behalf of the Bar Association and the Seminars Committee of the Bar Association for contributing your knowledge and time towards this webinar. Thank you very much, Rosita. And I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us on Zoom and on YouTube. And I hope you join us again today evening. We have another webinar on this series on mind and how to keep your mind and body healthy. That's at 7 o'clock today in the evening. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.